for joining us for Unite for Sight's webinar about the art of effective leadership, understanding the role of integrity and humility. We are thrilled to have all of you here with us today. My name is Jennifer Staple-Clark, and I'm the founder and CEO of Unite for Sight. I will briefly introduce you to Unite for Sight, review the webinar logistics, and then we will hear from our 6 expert panelists. Unite for Sight is a global health nonprofit organization that promotes high-quality care for all. We offer extensive global health and social entrepreneurship education programs, and our Global Health University program offers a free webinar series, including today's webinar. We also offer 20 online certificate programs for students and professionals. Many students receive academic credit for completion of our certificates, and professionals also often pursue the certificates for professional development purposes. And these certificate topics range from a certificate in global health to a certificate in responsible NGO management. Additional educational opportunities for students and professionals include participation in Unite for Sight's annual Global Health and Social Entrepreneurship events, which focus heavily on responsible global engagement. Our 16th annual Global Health and Innovation Conference, which is the world's largest global health and social entrepreneurship conference, will be held at Yale University on April 13th and 14th of 2019 and several months from now. The conference includes 300 speakers, including all of our panelists here today, and more than 2,000 participants for a weekend exchange of ideas across all disciplines of global health, international development, and social entrepreneurship. The conference website and registration can be seen at uniteforsight.org/conference, and we are currently accepting late-breaking abstracts for poster or oral presentation and also for our social impact pitch abstracts. And the final deadline for abstract submission is on January 31st of 2019 in just a couple of weeks. Additionally, we have healthcare delivery programs that provide care to patients living in extreme poverty. We partner with phenomenal local eye clinics in Ghana, Honduras, and India to provide quality eye care to patients who are otherwise unable to access or afford care. And these programs are locally led and managed by the local medical professionals, and our collaboration with them has provided eye care to more than 2.5 million people by local doctors, including more than 103,000 sight-restoring surgeries by the local ophthalmologists since 2005. Unite for Sight is the world's only organization that is a healthcare delivery organization that also offers immersive global health education and social entrepreneurship opportunities for students and professionals. The participants support and learn from the local doctors in Ghana, Honduras, and India as they provide care to patients living in extreme poverty in villages, slums, and refugee camps. And these participants, both students and professionals, learn from the local medical professionals about patient barriers to care and about effective strategies to reach the hardest-to-reach patients who are otherwise unable to access or afford care. And the local doctors are incredible social entrepreneurs who design effective and innovative strategies to eliminate patient barriers to care in their own local communities. Now I will describe for you the basic logistics of today's webinar. We are so delighted to have all of you with us here today. We have 6 amazing panelists, and they have a wealth of expertise to share with you during this next hour. Each of our panelists today will give a 2-minute introduction about themselves, their current role, and their key guidance and advice about leadership and the role of integrity and humility. Then we will dedicate the remaining time to questions and answers. We received many stellar questions from you, our audience, by Monday's question submission deadline, and we selected many of the most common and most thoughtful questions to ask our panelists here today. We also invite you to submit additional questions in the text box on the left of your webinar screen, and then we'll select some of those questions also to ask the panelists today. We also encourage you to tweet about the webinar, including your key lessons learned, by using the hashtag GHUwebinar, and you can see that hashtag in the webinar visuals on your screen. To begin today's webinar, I will share with you the key leadership attributes that leadership expert Sanjeev Chopra discusses. Sanjeev isn't available to join us as panelist here today, but he will be presenting a keynote address about leadership at Unite for Sight's 16th Annual Global Health and Innovation Conference at Yale in April. And he says that the best leaders share these attributes: listening, empathy, attitude that is upbeat and courageous, dreaming big, effectiveness, resilience, sense of purpose, humility, and often great humor, and integrity. And he also says that great leaders lead with both heart and soul, and that they have great ideas. His definition of leadership is, quote, leadership is the ability to articulate a vision and walk the path such that it inspires people to rise above the banality and strife of their common day existence and achieve a higher and common goal. So with these key thoughts in our minds to frame our conversation, we'll proceed now with having our incredible panelists introduce themselves in alphabetical order. I'm delighted to introduce you to our first panelist, Rebecca Hardin. Rebecca, please begin by introducing yourself, your background and current role, and please share your key guidance about leadership and the role of integrity and humility.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for being with us. My name is Rebecca, and I am a faculty member here at the University of Michigan, where I teach in a school for environment and sustainability. But I was trained as an anthropologist at Yale University, actually, and I bring my training in anthropology, in particular ecological and cultural anthropology, to bear on my work with sustainability professionals and educators around the world. I work primarily in Africa, and I work a lot on issues around the conservation of wildlife and freshwater systems and forests, and the kinds of social and political compromises that have to be made given the imperative of economic development in those regions, extractivism, mining, logging, and how those impact natural systems and human health. I think for the purposes of today's webinar, the most relevant thing I bring to the table is recent experience in leading curricular innovation efforts at my own university. I'm directing a program that has been building software platforms, open access software platforms for accessible modules to make sustainability science more usable, from the K-12 space to college and graduate and professional training, and to make it more translatable into the languages in which it might be needed worldwide, and to make it more compelling to a wider range of types of learners and audiences. In that capacity, I have learned a lot about humility of an older academic faced with the knowledge of young software developers, for example. I've learned a lot about integrity, the ways in which the systems in universities sometimes suppress or don't reward risk-taking and innovation to become better teachers. And I've learned a lot about the ways in which the attributes Jennifer just read, empathy, listening, risk-taking, vision, are absolutely essential if we want to be able to have change happen not only within our own selves and households, but within large institutions like my own university. I look forward to talking more about that and to thinking about leadership in university settings, but also in African settings where I've worked with all of you today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And Brian Hoyser, can you also please introduce yourself and share your key lessons learned as well?
Good afternoon, Jennifer. Thanks to Unite for Site for hosting. So first of all, I'm a faculty member in the Department of Leadership, Policy, and Organizations at the Peabody School of Education and Human Development at Vanderbilt. I also teach a class in Leadership and Management in Global Health at the Vanderbilt Medical Center. I'd actually like to jump right in terms of why I think leadership matters, and in particular integrity, humility, and empathy matters for public health and global public health, and use my time in that way. First, I want to say that when we talk about integrity, I think it's important that we define integrity, and I'm going to take a fairly scientific approach to that. What most of the leadership points to on integrity is that it has 5 primary components: honesty, sincerity, candor or truth-telling, expertise, and high standards. With regards to humility, I think it's important that we put it out there that we're not talking about some kind of moral standard. I would say the same thing for empathy, but rather humility in the psychological sense. And in this case, I give lots of kudos to my colleague Jennifer Cole-Wright and her work on the psychological significance of humility, because in this case, we're asking the question about whether or not it can be cultivated. So when you take humility as transcending oneself and understanding oneself as part of a greater whole, and that greater whole becomes, in fact, that around which you organize your mission and purposes, then I'm completely on board with moving in this leadership direction. I think these are critical for a handful of reasons. Number one, to heighten public awareness of global health issues. Number two, to contextualize the complexity of global health issues within those of general development issues. Three, I would argue that these are essential to strategize the most effective approaches to treatment, prevention, and partner collaboration. These are critical attributes to influence decision-making processes of stakeholder organizations and institutions, and also to communicate the importance and urgency of global health issues for the private sector. So those primarily are where I see these as touch places. I would also argue that integrity and humility are essential for advocacy, for increased resources, the identification and leverage of comparative advantages of different stakeholders, and also to ensure transparency and accountability that are built into organizational processes that we all know can be the death knell of organizations. So I look forward to talking about all that in greater detail.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brian. And Jordan Levy, please introduce yourself as well and share your key guidance.
Hi, yes. Thank you. Very happy to be here as well. My name is Jordan Levy, and I'm the Chief External Relations Officer, Ubuntu Pathways. And Ubuntu is an organization. We work in Port Elizabeth, South Africa, working with orphans and vulnerable children, trying to put them on a pathway from cradle to career and a pathway out of poverty. We provide comprehensive services and prioritize a depth over breadth approach and try to truly make a meaningful difference in the lives of the children and the families and the community that we work with. In terms of greatest advice or lesson in this subject, I also think the definitions are very important. I think in terms of the kind of outlook on integrity, in a lot of ways, we hope that we fundamentally have integrity, and I feel that sometimes we have to look at it in terms of it needs to be a fundamental aspect of who we are as people and how we interact with others. And we hope everybody in an organization would have those qualities that are basic in terms of relating to other people, talking about honesty, talking about transparency. And I think that is something that you want to approach from the very beginning and should be a foundation of who you are and how you interact, whether you're at work, whether you're trying to be a leader, or just interacting in the world. As we talk about leadership, I think humility for me is more interesting to dissect because I think we can understand in some ways why it might be difficult. And that's something we'll probably get to exploring in the terms of if we look at it as sort of a view of our own importance. And when we exaggerate our own importance, I think we act without humility. But as a leader, you're also asked to act with confidence and to believe in yourself. So in some ways, there are contradicting forces in that very definition, and that's why it makes it difficult and more complicated. And I think we can get to unpacking how you might try to act with humility, but at the same time display those leadership qualities that are asked of you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jordan. And Anna McCullough, please introduce yourself and share your key guidance as well.
Hi, I'm Anna McCullough. I'm the co-founder and CEO of QuestBridge, which is a national nonprofit organization that supports high-achieving students from low-income backgrounds. We help our students get accepted to 40 of the nation's top colleges on full or nearly full scholarships. And our students are from all over the country. We partner with schools like Yale and Columbia and lots of wonderful small liberal arts schools. And one of the things that we also have the luxury of doing is getting to know our students and supporting them through the college years. We currently have over 7,500 students going through our schools and about 5,000 alumni. And so I have the privilege of working with some of the most incredible people that I could imagine, and that, in some sense every day I am inspired deeply by our students and our staff, and it's easy, I suppose, in a way to feel humbled by them in the sense that their stories are so inspirational. But I think from a leadership perspective, I couldn't agree more with so much of what has already been said. I think that for me, kind of trying to embody the principles of integrity, humility, and empathy, I've found in my 25 or so years of leadership, I've found that those qualities can be very energizing and kind of life-giving, and particularly in challenging situations or when you're dealing with a difficult, for example, a difficult story that a student is experiencing, or even, a troublesome situation on the staff, that if you can, as a leader, embody these qualities, then it actually opens up space for people to actually resolve problems and makes the space sort of safe for people to be vulnerable and actually try to come at the problems at the deepest of levels. I also find that these qualities in leaders can be very disarming, and in a challenging situation where there's a lot of tension or friction, if you can come at it with authenticity and honesty and an open heart, in a sense, people kind of bring the best of themselves to the situation. So I have found those to be really important to try to embody and to model, in a sense, for the team that we have here. Of course, it's not always easy to do, and I find myself feeling very clumsy as a leader many times, but these are goals that I try to hold myself to, and like I said, really appreciate all that's already been said, and I find myself being inspired by the people on the panel. So thank you.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And Julie Mountcastle, please introduce yourself as well and share your key guidance.
So hi, I'm Julie Mountcastle. I'm so excited to be a part of this. What an amazing group of people. I can't wait to listen to all of you. I am currently the head of school and K-1 classroom teacher at Slate School, a private 501c3 elementary school in North Haven, Connecticut. I came to teaching from what I thought was the most collaborative art form, musical theater, but I was really wrong. And since that sort of enlightening discovery, I taught in public schools for nearly 20 years, and now I have joyfully landed in a school that truly believes that it's the uniqueness of each child that makes them excellent and not the other way around. Because of that ideal and such a strong belief in that mission, I think the leadership in our school has developed from this idea of educational humility, that whether we're dealing with children or other teachers or the parents, there's always side-by-side learning happening, not one person telling the other about what's important, but also just really a sharing of ideas and that building of community. And I think that shift of lens and that understanding has probably been most central to any ability that I have to keep the focus on the mission of the children at Slate School and lead in a way that I feel is collaborative, authentic, and respectful. I guess I also have the benefit of teaching children who are 5 and 6 who can smell anything that is not authentic a mile away and keep me humble every day. So in that way, I guess I do have an added benefit. So I'm looking forward to this today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Julie. And our final panelist, Mark Roithmayr, please introduce yourself as well and also share your key guidance.
Sure. And Jennifer, let me thank you and Unite for Sight again for these wonderful leadership panels. And it is delightful to be on a panel that talks about integrity and humility. I do feel in the nonprofit space, humility is the greatest business virtue you can have. So I'm thrilled to be here. And also thrilled to be with my fellow panelists. I echo what Anna and Julie have said. It's a great place, a great group to be part of and to learn from. My name's Mark Roithmayr. I'm the CEO of the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation. I have been in nonprofit voluntary healthcare agencies for 37 years. 20 years at the March of Dimes, 7 years as the first CEO ever of the organization Autism Speaks, and I spent 4 years at the Leukemia Society, launching venture philanthropy for them. And then 2 years ago came to the ADDF, and we are a venture philanthropy founded by the Lauder family, as in the Estee Lauder Corporation. We only fund translational research, that's drug discovery research, late-stage preclinical, phase 1, phase 2. We de-risk new treatments for dementia and Alzheimer's for pharma. So again, thrilled to be here. Greatest advice or lesson learned regarding leadership, I'll just touch on one of the aspects that was named up top. And that greatest advice or lesson is listening. 37 years I've been doing this, and I learned the value of listening the hard way. I had a wonderful mentor. I was about to make a big, huge speech inside the March of Dimes to about 400 or 500 people. It was on a slightly controversial topic, and my mentor gave me wonderful advice. He said, what you're going to give the speech on, your content's good, but don't open it up for questions, because it's slightly controversial, and you may get a debate going on the floor, and you don't need that. And I remember I gave the presentation. I was getting all sorts of applause. And I thought, well, I'm ending 5 minutes early. I'll take some questions. And the first question that came up was from the chairman of the board, and the second question that came up was from the CEO. And they didn't agree with each other on their perspectives on the questions. And it just, to this day, people in the March of Dimes remember this, and it was over 20 years ago. I bring it up because that was a hard way I learned of listening. And I think often for all of us, and for all of us on the phone, we feel like we're in these positions, we have the mission in our heart, we need to have all the answers. And we don't need to have all the answers in nonprofit. And oftentimes, and I'm doing this on my own 37 years, it's easy to get wrapped up in one's own ambitions, and rather than to take the time to sit back to listen. One of the great things about working in a nonprofit is you can ask all sorts of people, all sorts of constituencies, staff, and volunteers what their opinions are. And then input from all those opinions doesn't mean you don't have an idea of where you want to take things, but get the opinions, get the other thoughts, get the diversity of thought that's out there. And then our job as a leader is to take in all that thought, and then I'm going to allude to something Jordan alluded to before, and then lead, steer in a direction. And that humility versus taking the forefront on leading the direction, that sounds like it could be a dichotomy. It's really not, and particularly if one does it as a leader in the right way. So the big lesson is listening with steering, and that's something I'll comment on more later as we get deeper into questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you to all of our phenomenal panelists. As you heard, they all have a wealth of expertise and guidance to share with you today. Now we will proceed with the question and answer session. As mentioned, we received questions in advance from you, our audience members. If you have additional questions, please be sure to post them in the text box on the left of your webinar screen. And to start our first question for Mark, when you reflect on your leadership style, what do you see as the most important aspects of your journey that brought you to where you are now as a leader?
So this one just so clear in the ability to answer it, Jennifer, and that is the role of volunteers. We work in nonprofits. None of us have enough budget to go out and hire the staff and hire the consultants to do everything we want. We need an army of volunteers to help accomplish our mission. And, I once heard it, actually just about 2 weeks ago, I heard a saying about volunteers that if you work in nonprofit, always have a volunteer between you and the problem you're trying to solve. And the example I'll give of that in my own career, there was a point as I was running communications and marketing, and again, it was for the March of Dimes, and something came up against two competing media companies, one that had a big promotion for the March of Dimes, the other that wanted a big promotion for the March of Dimes. They were arch-rival competitors, and we needed to make a decision of which one we were going to go with. And it was a heavy decision for us at the time, and I remember we had sitting on our board somebody who owned radio stations. And he was not involved in the stations that were competing here, but owned radio stations. And I went to him and I just asked him, give me your background, give me your thoughts. And he walked through, this was a very kind of narrow needle to thread. he gave us the exact route to take and coached us every step of the way in the negotiation with these two media companies. We ended up choosing one, but the one we left didn't mind and was all done in the right way. So this concept of put a volunteer between yourself and whatever problem you're looking at, and I will flip it on the other side of that is put a volunteer between any opportunity that you have. There's a phrase that's used in nonprofits, volunteer-led, staff-driven. And all it simply means that is you as we as staff, we know the direction we want to go in. Who are the volunteers that can help lead it for us? So there's a lot more I can comment on that, but we've got a lot more questions than other panelists, Jennifer, so I'll give it back to you.
That's great. Thank you, Mark. And Anna, what have you found to be the best way to motivate and inspire your team?
Actually, at the risk of being repetitive with Mark, when I thought about this question, I explicitly wrote the word listen for that answer. I think for me, what's important is that the team knows and feels a sincere interest in them and in their ideas and what they care about and their passions and their concerns. And so I think my strategy has been, very much to remain genuinely open to our staff and, of course, have a vision and come with ideas. And I often try to, spark conversations with a kind of, hey, what if we tried this? But it's never something that I don't introduce an idea without being truly open to it being altered and changed and perhaps even thrown out the window if it's not a good idea. And I think that way we can have a really wonderful back and forth and often, pretty much universally when we approach ideas and innovation that way, then the idea just gets that much better as a product of multiple people's perspectives. And I find that when I approach the team that way with, a genuine openness and sincere interest in their ideas and thoughts, then they will bring a lot of energy to their work and to the question of inspiration and motivation. I find that just kind of falls naturally from feeling like what you're saying matters and that it's being heard.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And Julie, how do you balance having the necessary confidence to lead with having the humility to listen and to be receptive to ideas and thoughts from those who you are leading? And additionally, how do you manage any forms of conflict in a team?
Well, when I think about this question, it occurs to me that the most confident leaders, the most confident people really that I've met are those people who are able to identify and rely on others. They're not afraid to say what they don't know, and they free their staff or all of the people that they work with to share in that mission. And it makes for a much more sort of mission-centric instead of me-centric or leader-centric kind of hierarchy. And I think that's critical. I think in our school, we really have asked a lot of questions from schools all over the country to talk to other people, and I think so often I remember the advice from those other people, and I think that our success here is built on the shoulders of their successes and their challenges, frankly. So we are definitely always asking questions of others and asking questions of ourselves. We also have, as a big part of our school, the real belief that self-reflection is what drives education, and we model that for our own students, and so we model that, ourselves. We're very open with our students and talking about what we're trying to accomplish and how we do it as a team. So I think that those are really critical elements for us here, and I think that they're translatable into a lot of other fields. In terms of conflict, when you have a team that is really jigsawed in terms of their talents and their passions and they're thoughtful and truly wise people, I think conflict is opportunity. Discussion of difference, bringing new ideas, proposing change. That's the stuff of growth. And when you work on this as a team, that also increases, people's investment in what you're doing. But if you can make sure that you've built genuine respect for all the players in the room, that's what's really critical, because that makes all things possible. Seeing the unique talents of others and fostering different points of view, is what we're modeling for our students, because that's what we know that the world needs, and it's also creating for us a place of a model of education that we're really proud of and that we think moves the ball forward for children.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Julie. And another question for you, Julie. Some may be concerned about mistakes or failures along the way of leading a program or organization. How should perceived failures be incorporated into the journey? So maybe, Julie, if you could start, and then Rebecca, if you could add additional thoughts to that question as well.
Well, just in terms of our school, learning doesn't happen when you're just successful. When you're riding the wave of everything I'm doing is right and everything is wonderful, well, you're not learning. For us, we're always looking for the beautiful mistakes. We're always looking for that for ourselves. I think in particular here, we're often asked, what were the challenges of starting a new school? And I always point to one in particular, although there's been many opportunities for learning here. But one was our school was built over the course of a year and completed in the summer. And as sort of the central outdoor space at our school, there's a courtyard, and it's a beautiful space for indoor and outdoor learning, and we're very excited about it. But we missed the growing season for grass. And so in missing that, we had this incredible challenge of how are we going to use this courtyard. So the children came to school, there was grass seed down, there was hay over all the grass seed, and 16 kindergarten and first grade students stared at the courtyard and said, what are we going to do with that? Well, we watched it grow. We watched the grass grow. So we had this incredible challenge that we couldn't use this space, but it turned into an incredible opportunity, because for 8 weeks, 16 kindergarten and first grade students didn't put a toe on the grass. They watched the grass grow. They measured it in the classroom. We did all sorts of experiments. We talked about how long the day was, how much rain fell, and it became this incredible project for them. And so when they stepped on the grass for the first time, their ownership of that courtyard, their love for the grass, their feeling of pride in this very simple patch of land was more powerful than anything that could have gone perfectly right. It went more perfectly right because of the challenge. And so the mistakes, for us here, they're the stuff of dreams. It's what we're looking for all the time, because there are opportunities for teaching the children how to be flexible and how to really appreciate what the world gives us, because that's what we have to be able to do. So.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julie. And Rebecca, do you have additional thoughts about mistakes and failures along the way?
Well, sure. I think we all do. And it's so human to try not to dwell on that on the one hand, or to obsess about it on the other when you're attempting leadership yourself. And so finding that balance, first I would say, in terms of how to approach failures, with the right amount for you, right? The right amount of critical attention and honest attention, candor, to use the criteria that Brian listed earlier. But at the same time, and to bring attention to it, but at the same time, forgive yourself and be accountable, but also able to move past failures. Let me give you just a quick example from my work in conservation in West Africa. There were And I want to use this example because I love Julie's example so much, and her example is such a wonderful one for rethinking a landscape, rethinking a problem, and making it into a whole process you hadn't anticipated that has its own benefits. But sometimes mistakes actually really cause harm. And when that happens, as happened, for example, when I was working for a protected area in Central African Republic, and we were training the first cohort of guards for that reserve, and the very well-meaning young scientists and volunteers, yes, the volunteers between the World Wildlife Fund and the problem, who were attempting to train those first individuals, were walking a line between conveying to the local community the seriousness with which poaching would be treated and the consideration for the infringement on community rights that the new conservation regime entailed. And to make a long story short, there was an overuse of force early on and a bit of property damage that lingered and created really terrible relationships between local communities who were fishing for their livelihoods and this new project of ours. And I think in that case, one of the things that happened is that the leadership of the project, we volunteers included, had to think very hard about how to genuinely say and show we're sorry we made a mistake, and we want to repair that harm. And what was interesting to watch was how that lesson got learned in the field, on the ground, in the Central African Republic, but then worked its way back up into the program offices in Washington, D.C., where new kinds of programs were emerging around wildlife and human needs and incorporating livelihoods for the first time. This was in the mid 80s, right? Into conservation policy and trying to make more and more room for those concerns. And so in some ways, the mistakes in the field and the incidents and violences of being on the front lines of conservation struggles ended up creating far more humane and diverse programs that matured into the integrated conservation and development movement and now are in a whole different set of precedents and legacies on the African continent and many other places, and may have some roles in the success of conservancies today in Africa and also the problems that conservancies face. So I think, one thing I will say about failure is where there is harm, accountability, and that genuine willingness to identify that is key. It's absolutely key. And at the same time, and it's part of moving past into better practice. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Rebecca. And in that same vein, Jordan, what are examples of leadership pitfalls that you have directly observed which originated due to a lack of collaboration and humility, and what should have been done differently to help ensure a positive outcome?
Thank you. The answers before me have been excellent and illustrated so many key points. What I want to focus on is some of the things that we some of the factors we have to look at, some of the things we have to move away from, and some of the things we have to embrace in order to achieve what we're talking about here. One of the key factors that I think undercuts leadership in the sense of how we would like it to exist is fear. And I think we see this in the world. Those who end up stoking fear are usually those that are experiencing fear themselves and then transferring that fear onto others. And it's the fear of so many things that often cause these pitfalls that you asked about, Jennifer. When we fear being vulnerable, when we fear exposing ourselves in some way, we end up making the worst decisions and actually making things worse. And a lot of it is wrapped up in pride. A lot of it is wrapped up in what we feel are our accomplishments. If we feel that something we've done hasn't been valued or is too important to turn back on. The actual decisions that I've seen that embodied this, that were problematic in my career, have been when people haven't been able to admit mistakes, when projects have gone forward for the sake of the momentum that was already built, the pride in what had already occurred that was sort of a sunk cost and should have been evaluated on its merit, was not evaluated on its merit. Projects that should have been stopped, projects that should have never been funded, relationships with funders that caused perverse projects to move forward, that were the incentives behind them were about money or about accomplishing something for the sake of accomplishing it, or about accomplishing something so somebody could report to a board, instead of going back to the mission of what you set out to do in the first place. And in our field, the mission is what is important. We all got into this business, this sector, to accomplish something because we believed in something. And sometimes those things are skewed and they evolve into something that isn't at all what we set out to occur. And usually for me what happens is it occurs from some point where there should have been a realization, or there actually was a realization that something was on the wrong track, that something was going wrong. But fear got in the way of recognizing that, either to yourself. There's often self-denial, and that's where I think humility comes in, and self-awareness, and putting that above the fear, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable, even to yourself, and admitting to yourself that, hey, we did make a mistake here. Hey, we should go a different direction. But then sometimes even if that occurs and you do admit it to yourself, you don't want to admit it to another stakeholder, whether it is your organization, whether it is a funder, whether it is the community you're serving. But actually, if you were to open yourself up and expose that vulnerability, you'd have a positive chain reaction. And I think others will often recognize the bravery of your vulnerability as opposed to seeing it as a weakness. And when you harden to that, and when you create fear and show fear, there's a negative chain reaction that creates a culture where everybody's running to save their own butts, so to speak, and everybody starts to sort of blame each other, and everybody indulges in this culture of fear. But if you, as a leader, and that can really come from anywhere in an organization or in a group, truly have the courage to show your vulnerability and say, you know what, I recognize that, for example, this project is way off course, and we're going to have to start from scratch, and that all my work is going to be erased, or I'm not going to get this funder's money anymore. You start to encourage that culture, and other people start to make decisions that way, and are more honest, more transparent. And I think not only are you a better leader, but you create a better organization. And I just wanted to note at the end of that, I believe it goes back to some of Julie's points, where she spoke about children and the way children are, and the way children naturally will explore and take risks. But when we create the fear around them, they start to also absorb this culture of fear. They lose that innocence, they lose that ability, and sometimes when you go down that road, it ends up building within you, and you become more fearful and less courageous as you become an adult. Thank you.
That's great insight. Thank you so much, Jordan. And Mark, how do you make decisions and help to ensure that your colleagues and teams stay aligned with the organization's mission and values?
Yeah, so great question. I would just say for folks on the phone, if you ever want to read more or read deeper on these leadership styles, the Harvard Business Review a couple of years back did a wonderful study and came up with, they studied over 20,000 executives and came up with 6 leadership styles: coercive, authoritative, affiliative, democratic, pace-setting, and coaching. And it's a good, crisp article you can read, because even by the sounds of all of those, like coercive, first of all 6 are needed. All 6 are interchangeable. You often use 2 of them at one time, and several of them aren't as bad as they sound, and several of them aren't as good as they sound. And the example I'll give is coercive. That's a style that's used when you hit a crisis and just somebody at the top needs to make decisions, and you got to move fast, and it's kind of life and death kind of stuff, right? Democratic, which sounds wonderful, and it is, but one of the pitfalls of that is paralysis by analysis, and you never move in any direction. And it gets back to what one of our speakers said earlier. How do you lead and still stay humble? I give you all that as background because A, it's just interesting additional reading if anybody's interested. But second, I bring it up because there is an authoritative leadership model that speaks to this question very well. And the style goes something like this. The leader needs to really talk to a lot of people and listen to get their input on a vision. But then the leader is expected to set the direction, but then figure out all of the constituencies who are involved in making that vision happen. And one by one, explain to those constituencies, so it might be heads of departments, or a CEO be heads of departments. Okay, I've listened to everybody. Here's the direction we're going to be going in. So you, who's head of marketing, here's your role. You, who's head of program, here's your role. You, who's head of fundraising, who's your role. You, who's head of administration and operations, here's your role. And then step back and let them do it. Don't micromanage them. Give them the vision. Explain how their role fits with the vision. But then let them do what they're best at doing, right? And the leader still has to stay in communication and in contact and check in and where we're on the milestones and the goals, but let your folks do what they're there to do. And one of the toughest parts for a leader, and I use this style often, I've been involved in startups, I've been involved in turnarounds, I've been involved in taking the organization to the next level in the style of listening, putting a vision and a roadmap together, explaining to the individual people who have to lead parts of that roadmap what this vision is all about, but then let them do it. Let them be creative. One of the toughest parts in all of that, Jennifer, that I've done is that when you're doing that and then sometimes there's something they're not holding up their end of it, and that gets difficult because that often means you have to replace them, right? So the leader doesn't abandon once they have the vision. That communication still goes on. However, let the folks, let the constituents around you deliver on what their expertise is.
That's great. Thank you, Mark. Brian, can empathy, integrity, and humility be taught, and how can leaders incorporate these traits if they have not previously been their core values?
It's a great question, Jennifer. The short answer is, I think, yes, but it helps when they flow naturally from who the person is, the leader, the manager. But let me deal with one very quick thing. I think there's an important qualification to this discourse on listening. Leaders and managers are inundated with information. Inundated. You know that. Every great leader, every leader of every organization knows that part of their task is to ferret through, if you will, the just copious amounts of information that they're given. They're required to listen to lots of stakeholders every day. And so I think part of the humility and the integrity piece here is how leaders actually get the information that they need in order to make the decisions they have to make. So just simply going out and radically listening to everybody, while that might make everybody in the organization feel really good that they're heard, I think what the more effective strategy is for the leader to develop a very robust set of questions that go exactly to their stakeholders' piece of the organization, whether that is a partner or that's someone in the organization that's involved in operations. Those targeted questions that allow both that individual to be heard, but also give the leader the information they need is absolutely essential today. We're inundated with email, we're inundated with tweets, we're inundated with all of this, and in order to make those decisions, the quality of that information that the leader is listening to has got to be there. Otherwise, I think it's problematic. In terms of how to develop these capabilities, my number one suggestion is to get a professional coach. In all honesty, everybody I know that is running an organization these days has a really good professional coach It takes humility to reach out to a coach. It takes humility to go to somebody, a professional coach, and say, I don't have all the answers. I don't actually know how to tackle all these things. Can you help me do this? And coaching, I think, is a really, really big part of a lot of leadership and management today. The other thing I would recommend, for those of you who may not know it, the Korn Ferry Institute, that's K-O-R-N-F-E-R-R-Y, Korn Ferry Institute, has one of the best leadership architect and global competencies frameworks I've ever seen. And what it allows leaders to do and managers to do is really go through that inventory and self-assess along nearly 50 different dimensions, and then address their own shortcomings. In terms of humility and leadership, some of those dimensions in the Korn Ferry inventory stand out. Building effective teams, building networks, collaboration, ensuring accountability. Utterly critical to everything that everyone on this call has said is instilling trust. Interpersonal savvy, managing complexity, and finally, in the global context, we all know this one, managing ambiguity. Can it be taught? Yes, but I think humility is the key to getting there.
Great. Thank you, Brian. And Anna, how do you balance management with visionary leadership?
That's also a great question. Thank you, Jennifer. I was thinking about this, and really the first thing that came to mind is actually reflection. So it's taking the time, even though it is a busy role to be the leader and something that, you could always be going in 15 million directions and still have lots left to do, actually carving out time for yourself to reconnect with what you're here for and why you're here periodically is really, I think, powerful, because at least for me, it helps me to recenter and remind myself why I'm here. And when I do that, it serves a couple of purposes. First of all, it gives the rest of the team permission to do the same thing and sort of at times take a pause and just say, okay, what is it that we're really trying to do here? What matters the most to us, and what's our mission, and how can we make sure that our decisions are aligned with that mission and our own personal missions as well. But also, I have found that when I take the time and I'm not sort of constantly frenetically running around, that actually the decisions in terms of how to spend my time, where to put my attention, where to put my energy, those decisions come easier for me. I tend to know better where to put my focus at any given moment because I am more connected sort of to what the absolute core is, what the core reason is that I'm here and doing this work. So while we all feel that we don't have enough time, I'm an advocate for actually trying to make time for self-reflection or whatever it is that rejuvenates you. Maybe it's going on a run or, writing in a journal or sitting in quiet for a little while. But, however it works for you, I think it's very, very important for the leader to do that and also to model that.
That's terrific. Thank you so much. And Rebecca, how do you ensure that you are a leader who maintains cultural humility and respect for local community members? And do you find that you change as a leader when you're in a different setting?
Thanks for that question. When I was reading that question as we all prepared this webinar, I thought about the complexity of the question. I'll take the last part first. Does one change as a leader in a different setting? I think certainly, and not just immediately, but progressively, as leaders, when we enter other settings, whether it's a subculture or a different culture or simply a different discipline or field or knowledge, expert community, I think instantly our antennas start to work to help us understand some of the norms, the language, the body language of those with whom we're communicating. So part of that is about being an alert and attentive communicator. And I think that can happen anytime we change context and should happen. And it should almost be something, I think it builds kind of nicely on this last answer we just had about reflection and taking time to sort of center and ground yourself, because I think it then enables us as leaders to be more agile and ready to take in and adapt to different norms of interaction and communication in different settings. And I could give you so many examples of that. Some of it has to do with my work with engineers, right? I'm working with a lot of teams of engineers right now, and I have I really had to learn to stop using such big sentences and such large words. I mean, they value terse, concrete, clear communication, right? And they use a lot of very complex scientific language, but they really value practically accessible, clear language. And so absolutely, when I'm interacting with those folks, I'm constantly, sort of attending to myself and my language use, which I learned teaching in Paris at the Sorbonne and becoming an anthropologist. Let me tell you, neither of those experiences taught me to be succinct, okay? So I do find that happens, and certainly, again, bring work in various African contexts into the conversation. There, too, I find lots of cues. And one of the things I think I'll throw in quickly about that is that the listening piece, which many of us keep picking up again and again in this conversation, is fascinating if you're in a situation like a kind of palaver under an African tree, which is literally a meeting form I've engaged in many times in my fieldwork, where people sit around together under a tree and talk about problems, often presided over by an elder or a group of elders. People actively listen in many African cultures and languages. In fact, there's a kind of signification of listening in dialogue where people will say, or or, there's some way of indicating verbally, I hear you, go on, right? And that's a kind of incredible thing to be in the presence of if you've come out of a U.S. context, because it's very powerful, this idea of active verbal listening, right? So that's another example of something I sort of learned from another context, and how I think that adaptation to a context is part of what a good leader should strive to be better at.
That's excellent. Thank you, Rebecca. And Julie, how are the humility, respect, integrity, and collaborative nature of an organization's leadership integral to the effectiveness and overall health of an organization?
Well, I think that's pretty easy to see. If all of the people that you're working with understand that they are respected and heard, and they see that the leader of the organization is being authentic, following through with all of the things that they put forward, but also resisting the fear and not being afraid to transparently continue their own journey, sharing their goals for growth as a person, or in my case as an educator. But I think that's totally transferable. I think that your organization is going to be much healthier. Everyone has contribution, everyone has investment, and all of the participants are authentically participating in ways that feel natural and important. So I think those are critical things.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julie. And a question for both Jordan and Brian, and perhaps Jordan can start. We've discussed a lot of valuable and insightful information today about leadership. How do you suggest that each of our webinar participants incorporate these lessons learned into their own work in a fluid and authentic way?
Sure. I think at the end of the day, incorporating anything you might learn on a webinar like this one is about finding ways to incorporate it practically in real life settings. So in your day-to-day work, you're going to be busy. You're going to be in a diverse range of contexts. But if you can take some of the things that you believe are useful and sort of create a framework to reflect on as you're doing the things you normally do. I mean, you wouldn't want to start immediately changing the way you manage completely, or changing what you're trying to accomplish based on something that you've learned. Instead, take that and incorporate it practically into everyday life. Use it as a way to reflect on the decisions you're making. Use it to reflect on how you're implementing something. So some of the panelists talked about kind of analyzing, are you being self-aware? Are you noticing your leadership style? Are you truly listening? Are you truly being humble? It's actually simple to pause from time to time during your daily routines, during your daily activities, during decisions you're making, and kind of analyze, am I doing this in a way that reflects the type of leader I want to be and the things that I've learned both by listening to experts and by actually experiencing it. And I definitely would reiterate the advice of finding a coach, a mentor, somebody that you can be vulnerable with and express your concerns and ask them to give you a read on yourself as well, somebody you can have a sort of a safe space with, because even as you reflect yourself, it's hard often to know if you're judging yourself fairly one way or another.
Excellent. Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah,
Brian, do you have additional thoughts?
Jordan, I think that's wonderful. Yep. Let me take it in. First of all, just affirm the role of the mentor again, the role of the professional coach. What I've learned from my wife, Professor Martin at Vanderbilt, is that also a mentoring team that has multiple individuals that address multiple capabilities or competencies that you want to develop in yourself is really key. She and some of my other colleagues actively seek out multiple mentors. The other thing, and this is a plug, more training. How about Unite for Sight? Global Health University, more training, right? Unite for Sight has provided a copious amount of other resources via Global Health University and their excellence in global health education, the online certificates, the webinars, the internships, et cetera, more training. And more so than ever, thanks to Unite for Sight, it's right at your fingertips for free. I'll leave it at that.
That's great. Thank you so much, Brian. And thank you to all of our phenomenal panelists for sharing your insights and expertise today with our webinar audience. This now concludes today's webinar. Thank you so much, everyone.